And good morning, guys. Welcome to the DFS Minute for Wednesday, May 6, 2015. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm your host, Michael Rathburn, also known as Rath throughout the daily fantasy industry. You can also find me on Twitter at FantasyWrath. And I had a few people yesterday say, hey, what's your username on DFS sites? And I never really give that out, but I'm not hiding anything. I do go by the username Burn Notice. And the kind of the background behind that is there was a show on USA Network called Burn Notice. The main character's guy's name was Michael, and he was from South Florida. And my first name was Michael. I lived in South Florida, and so that was kind of, and my last name is Rathburn, so that's kind of how the whole thing played out. That just, that's whatever. That's just the historical background behind the name, but I do go by the name Burn Notice. So if you ever see me in a contest, that is me. So let's talk about some a little bit of industry news, not too much. We'll talk about the pitchers last night, the value pitchers that the RotoCurve team recommended on the Curve Show and in the chat room, and what happened with those pitchers, and talk about some of the picks I gave out last night, which ones hit, which ones didn't. We had another Strasburg tilt, which is always fun. And we'll go into today's slate a little bit and talk about pitchers, talk about hitters. And then I'm going to get into what are some of the metrics that I look at, some of the statistics that I look at when I'm looking at starting pitchers for the day. And the data is from Fangraphs, and I'll give you a brief Excel spreadsheet on that. And it's quick, it's easy. And it's something you can do in probably about 10 minutes every single morning. And then throughout the day, you can kind of get a feel for where you want to go with pitchers. And then when lineups come out, you can make your decision there. But what I do is I do my research in the morning for about 30 minutes, try to lock in on pitchers and then some of the team hitters that I'm going to target for the given day. And then once lineups come out and value plays come out and things like that, guys move around, that's kind of where the picks settle in. So you got to go in with a foundation of where you want to go, and then as the lineups come out, then you can make your decisions. Industry news briefly. Posted a story last night on Twitter about FanDuel and Floyd Mayweather. Looks like they paid about $1 million to have the logo on the trunk, and then a couple of mentions of it. Consensus from the daily fantasy sports public is what a waste of money. Well, you know what? It's their money. They can do what they want with it. Definitely interesting marketing. Not sure how you convert users from it, whether it was worth $1 million or not. But look, there were a lot of people watching that fight between the ages of 18 and 40 that are probably sports fans and had, like I said with Tony Cicada the other day, a quote-unquote vested interest in the fight. So when you start talking about target demographic, that's kind of where it is. Now, if Mayweather had said, hey, use my FanDuel promo code money, that might have moved the needle a little bit. So, that would just be the way that I would have probably looked at it. But that's kind of it for industry news. It's been very quiet. There are a few things rumbling in the background that we definitely can't talk about, but there are some potential big things coming and discussions coming in daily fantasy sports, but not anything that we can put out there publicly. It would jeopardize sources, and it would jeopardize potential negotiations, and it's not something that we're looking to do. I've never been one to try to put that stuff out there because you never know what could happen and the fallout from it. So best just to tell you guys that there are some things brewing right now, and definitely going to happen for the NFL and probably in the next 30 to 60 days. So definitely be aware of that, and we'll let you know what that is hopefully soon. Last night, recommendations, talk about the Curve Show. Benny and Josh and myself gave out one value pitcher for the night, and kudos to Josh. Josh took it down. The value pitcher challenge, I guess, is what we want to call it if we want to start something. His guy was Shelby Miller, and he was attacking the Phillies, and rightfully so. also felt like the Braves are going to get a pretty big lead and that Miller would go long in the game. No Utley last night as well. Now, I know Benny and myself were off of Miller because we felt like the strikeouts weren't going to be there, but they were last night. And if you played on DraftKings, you got a bunch of bonus points, I like to call it a video game score, because you got the complete game, you got the win, you got the shutout, you got all those bonus points for Shelly Miller last night. So if you took down Shelly Miller, like the guys say, you probably took down all the monies, because most everybody else was on Zach Greinke. So if you paired Miller with Greinke, you had a phenomenal night. 70-plus points for your pitching just on DraftKings alone, and you probably finished at the top of most of your tournaments. So Benny's guy was Rick Porcello, and I didn't agree with that as well. But Benny was picking on the Rays, and Porcello actually has pitched pretty good this year. Had a couple of bad outings, but he's had some really good outings, and Porcello pitched a great game. So Benny definitely came through with Porcello yesterday. And then my guy that I put up in the chat and also a little bit out on Twitter and on the DFS Minute PM edition was Jesse Chavez. I was picking on the Twins. Jesse Chavez's price was ridiculously low. He was a pretty good pitcher last year. Now he's got this rotation spot with Graveman out. And again, I'm picking on the Twins. So you see the common theme here. When it comes to value pitchers, what you're looking for is you're looking to pick on one of the worst offenses against that handed pitcher. And I'm going to get into that a little bit at the end of the video today. I'm going to show you a screenshot of an Excel spreadsheet that I do every day. It takes about 10 minutes, and it's a real simple chart that you can do from data from FanGraphs. And you can change the metrics, you can add more, you can take out, you can change whatever it is. You don't have to copy what I do. I'm just showing you my method of what I do at the beginning of the day for daily fantasy baseball research and what I'm looking at from a team hitting perspective, so I can target starting pitchers. And I try to get a short list of about 6 guys, usually 3 on the high side and 3 on the middle and the low side. And then depending on how lineups come out and how things play out, you try to narrow that down to the 2 guys you're going to take in all your heads ups and 50-50s and the 2 guys that you're going to take in your tournaments. Now, sometimes there's overlap, and sometimes you're going to, like last night, I rolled with Greinke and Richards in my 50-50 heads ups, Greinke and Chavez in my tournament. So sometimes that one guy could carry over. It just depends on the given night and the landscape and how many pitchers are available and the matchups and stuff like that. So sometimes it's going to be 3, sometimes it's going to be 4. So we'll get into that. Value plays last night on the hitter side. Didn't have the monster night that we had the night before, but, you know, Billy Burns did come through, one of the cheapest guys out there in daily fantasy baseball right now. Billy Burns hit with a 13 over on DraftKings. Pedroia had a 7. Castro had a 7. Napoli, Vogt had a 4. So, you know, he actually came back to earth, and the guy's human. Napoli had a 3. Freese had a 2. I did roll with Burns, Pedroia, Castro, and Vogt. Those were kind of the 4 guys that I had out there. And then I did have Rayburn and Ethier who put up goose eggs. But I did have Freeman in a lot of places. I did have Matt Carpenter. And so those were some of the big guys. Now, I didn't talk about those guys on the video because, again, we're trying to focus on value plays. There's a lot of content out there right now in the industry talking about all the top hitters that you should take every day and all the top pitchers. And what we're trying to do here at RotoCurve is try to give you different content with a different view. And I came up with this concept the other day. I said, you know, we're not trying to give you information. We're trying to give you insight. We're not trying to give you advice. We're trying to give you insight. And what insight means is we're trying to give you the why behind the buy. Is why should I take this player? Why should I put this guy in my lineup? What are the statistics behind what's driving it? Where's the value? And how can I basically put up a better lineup and have a better strategy than the guy that I'm going against? So that's really what I'm trying to do here. It's what Benny and Josh are trying to do, us as a team, is give you insights into DFS, daily fantasy sports, daily fantasy baseball, the behind the numbers. No, not just, hey, this guy's got a good matchup today, or he's playing in Coors, or take this guy because he's in Petco. That's not what's going to help players. What's going to help players is you give them the reasons why you like this particular player on a given day, and you have to back that up with data. It can't just be I like this guy because he's in a good spot today. So, you know, that's kind of what you're going to see more of that data coming through. You've seen it with some of my videos at night. I'm trying to give you statistics, and just more and more throughout the RotoCurve show, the Curve show that we have here, you're going to hear more statistical backup that will give you the ammunition that you need to produce winning lineups. talk about briefly last night. One of the things too, I happened to see CONDIA posted some heads ups. I know he usually posts heads ups and things like that, but I kind of stayed away from CONDIA. I was kind of leaving him alone. I think I beat the guy, like, you know, along with, it seems like everybody else is beating him all day long. Happened to pick up a few games, and again, seeing stacks or mini stacks in head-to-head contests, and it's a head scratcher to me. I don't really understand why you would ever do it unless you're playing in like a 4-game slate or a 3-game slate like today, and you really have no other options. So my advice to guys out there, and we always say, you know, in your 50-50s and your heads ups, never go more than 2 hitters on a team and 4 hitters in a game in your 50-50s and your heads ups, because your equity is tied up into one team and one game. And if it doesn't go the way that you think, your team is going to implode and you're going to have a bad night. So basically diversify your lineups. You know, we try to make a joke out there, you know, do the Wu-Tang Financial, diversify your bonds, and just that's the way you got to go, you know, and we'll talk about that a little bit more down the line, but I can't stress it enough. Don't take 3 or 4 guys from the same team, because you're going to get burned. You want to do it in a tournament, you want to do it with multi-entry, that's fine. But you do it in heads-ups and 50-50s, and you're going to come out on the losing end, because, again, these are strategies that are not designed for those contests. Your strategies for your 50-50s and heads-ups are diversify and low risk. Basically, you want to think of it as like bonds. You know, you're looking at bonds. Hey, maybe they don't yield a ton of interest, but they're solid and steady guys over the course of the season, over that given day. So that's kind of my take on that and what you can learn from that. And that's something that, you know, by playing a guy like that who was a monster volume player in this industry and seems to have gone on hard times, you know, that's something that you can learn from, and strategy that you can pick up as far as what not to do and how not to play. Because from what I've been told right now, the guy's not winning in baseball. Sounds like the guy's in the hole quite a bit. So that strategy doesn't work in these cash games, and that's why. All right, today we got kind of an interesting slate. We got 3-day games. One of them happens to be the Arizona-Colorado game. Now, the funny thing about this is that, of course, whenever you have the Colorado Rockies at Coors, everybody wants to load up. We saw FanDuel juicing up the salaries, and we know DraftKings does too. Ironically, so you got Monday postponement, Tuesday postponement, and then today you've got a 3 o'clock afternoon game, and you got a 6:40 game. So you're not even going to be able to use these guys in any of these games. So it's kind of crazy that basically everybody's going to get screwed on the Colorado series this week, and you can't have any action on them. So I think it's actually pretty funny, because I actually kind of agree. Jeff Mans from Fantasy Alarm said on the radio yesterday, SiriusXM Fantasy, he says, I actually love it when when Coors games are being played, because I don't play any of those players, and I fade those guys, and then I watch them crash and burn when it doesn't come through. And I'm kind of the same way. I mean, I will have like 1 or 2 guys from those games just because I want to have exposure to it. But I'm not loading up on 7 Coors guys. I'm just not doing it unless I'm firing multi-entry into a tournament. And even then, the ownership is going to be so high and the salary is going to be so high that you don't even have an edge. So that's just a way that certain guys feel and how it played out. So ironically, nobody's going to get to use Coors for the most part. Early game, you got Scherzer going, monster favorite, -225, and you also have Chris Heston. Brief analysis on the early slate. It's only 3 games, but I think the only way to go if you're going to play, look, don't play large field tournaments. It's a waste of time. If you want to play heads ups and 50-50s, that's fine. But as I always say, check out the qualifiers and the satellites on DraftKings, because there is an opportunity where the competition is soft and it could be overlay. So don't be afraid to jump in and fire some entries on a small scale. You can roll with Scherzer, and I think Chris Heston, who's at home against the Padres, and he's been pretty good and he's pretty cheap. And then maybe load up on some Arizona and Colorado guys and see what happens. That would be kind of the way that I go. I might look to get a little piece of action in those. So, but on to the full slate. Talk about pitchers first, and we'll get into it at the end. But kind of my research so far has told me that the 2 top guys that I'm looking at in 50-50s and heads up today are going to be Garrett Cole and Lance Lynn. Both of them are favorites at home with a 7 total. Cole has the Reds, Mike Leake, And so he's up to 9,500 on DraftKings, which, you know, is a pretty nice bump. He's up $1,200. But Lance Lynn's at 8,800, well, which is nice because you're looking to get around that 17, 18, 19K range for your 50-50s and heads ups on pitching and DraftKings. So you can plug in Lynn and you can plug in Cole tonight, and I think you're going to be safe and be able to lock in a floor 40, maybe with an upside of 50 to 60, which is always nice. Both guys can get you 20, 25 points. It's going to be good. Then we talk about talk about the hitting. Now on the tournament side, there's two guys that I've got circled early on is Scott Kazmir going against the Twins and Alfredo Simon going against the White Sox at 5,300 on DraftKings. Now here's the deal with Simon. We talked about the strategy of picking on bad teams. The White Sox offense is the worst in baseball right now. Simon hasn't been bad. Now you talk about a guy who's a $5,300 pitcher. He is going against Chris Sale, but I'm not worried about the win when I'm taking a guy like this. I'm looking at, can this guy get me 7 innings, 7 strikeouts, and 2 earned runs or less? I don't worry about the hits and the walks so much, but I'm mostly looking at those statistics. And, Chris Sale is going to be having a tough matchup tonight going against Detroit with all those right-handed bats. Could this be a close game, 3-2, 4-3 type game? Definitely could see it. I think Stone's going to get not going to get bombed. I think the blow-up factor is not there. His results so far this year, 10, 24, 28, 18, 3. Now, he had a bad outing last time out, but he averaged 17 DraftKings points and he's 5,300. So that's 3x right there. I think he can get to 20. I think he can get you a 4x tonight, and that's huge, especially in a tournament. You need that. We talked about $50,000 salary. And you need about 140, 150 to really move up in a tournament, probably about 175 to win the whole thing. So I think for me, Simone really stands out as a guy that gives you the potential to give you the multiplier back. And Kazmir is at 8,000. So can Kaz put up a 25 or 30 against the Twins? Yes. And can Simone put up a 20, 15, 20, or even 25 against the White Sox? I think the answer is yes. So that's kind of what I'm looking at when it comes to pitchers. And those are, as they're at the day and at the evening, that might change, but that's kind of where I'm rolling with right now. And we'll see where everyone else is in the industry, because as it stands right now, the great thing about the DFS Minute AM is there's no other information really out there. So I'm kind of like the first guy bringing it to you as far as where to go and what to do for that day. And then we come in at noon and get you to 1. Then we come back around 6:30. From a pitching side, I think there's a couple guys that are risky. Talked about Chris Sale. Carlos Carrasco is an underdog going against Kansas City. To me, Carrasco is probably a very high risk spot tonight. Probably not a guy I'm looking to take. And also Chris Sale. Those are really guys that if you're firing multiple entries in a tournament or a qualifier and you think that everyone else is going to be off those guys, you take a shot. If they blow up, they blow up. But if they hit, it's going to be huge. So, those are some plays you want to go against the curve, but definitely not players that I'm going to recommend tonight. I would only recommend those guys if you're playing in maybe a large field tournament or a qualifier and you have multiple entry and you're only trying to get first place. That's kind of the strategy with those. I think some bats that you might be able to look at tonight is, the Braves left-handers going against Jerome Williams. We obviously know about Freeman and Brzezinski. And then the Rays left-handed bats against Masterson, because Masterson has never, ever shown the ability to get a left-handed bat out. Now, there's not a ton of good left-handed hitters, but, maybe we get a little bit of value on some guys hitting at the top of the lineup or in the middle. Maybe a guy like James Loney happens to sneak in there and have a good lineup spot. He's super cheap. So that would be somebody you want to look at. Now we're going to get into the fun stuff, and hopefully this thing works. I'm going to show you a chart that I do every day, that I pull the numbers from Fangraphs, and it's team hitting statistics, and it allows me to identify what pitchers for the day that I want to look at. And then it also will allow me to say, hey, what are some of the bats that I want to target? Who are the handedness of teams that they look at? So you see here, I've got a spreadsheet in Excel, and I've got it sorted by team. And then what I do is I add the column versus lefty versus righty. And then the metrics I'm bringing over are hard percentage, which is from Fangraphs under the batted ball tab on Fangraphs. that's the only place that you can pull that statistic that I know of. So what I do is I go to fangraphs.com, I go to leaders, I go to team stats, and I go to hitting. And then what I do is in the drop down box is I select left-handed pitcher first under the split section. So I get the statistics against left-handed pitching. Then I go down to the boxes on the bottom and I select the metrics that I want. And I go the first thing I do is I go to batted ball and I get my hard hit ball hit percentage. What that means is how hard is the team making contact and hitting the ball hard. Which is a lot of things like line drive rate, fly ball rate, things like that. So I want to know, is a team hitting the ball hard or are they not a hard hit? Because that's going to tell me whether or not they've got upside to blow up the pitcher. Then we're looking at weighted on base percentage, which is one of the #1 metrics that we use in daily fantasy. I'm looking at weighted runs created. What that is, it factors in the park. And so if you go down to a team like the Rockies, you'll see that the Rockies actually, wait a minute, look at their weighted on base. They're one of the tops in the league, but their weighted runs created, which factors in the park, is actually low. So what that means is when the Rockies go on the road, they're a team that you want to pick on because they're really weighted by the ballpark. I look at strikeout rate and I look at walk rate. And then what I'm doing is I'm sorting. You have 60 outcomes here. You have 30 teams. You have lefty and righty. So I pull the lefty stats, I pull the righty stats, I copy and paste, I bring them over to Excel. And then what I do is I do a sort. And I'm basically taking around the top 15 and I'm giving them a dark green. I'm taking the middle 15, I'm giving them a light green. I'm taking the around the 75 percentile, I'm giving them a pink. And then the bottom 25%, I'm giving a red. And I'm doing that for the 5 metrics that I have. So what that allows me to do is get a feel for the team as a whole. If I see a lot of reds and pinks, then I want to look at starting pitchers. If I see a lot of greens, I want to make sure I stay away from those pitchers. And those are the hitters that I want to target for the day. And then I'm also looking at the pitching metrics and seeing, is this particular team going against a lefty or a righty? And then that's who we determine. So what I do then is I then look at the weighted on base, and you see here the Dodgers against right-handed pitching are the top team in the league at this point. So we've been talking about left-handed bats for the Dodgers pretty much for the last 2 weeks. You can see here they're greens across the board. The Blue Jays against left-handed pitching, which makes sense because they're right-handed heavy power hitting team, and at home their ballpark favors right-handed hitters against lefties. Monster numbers for the Blue Jays against lefties. You also see the Yankees and the Orioles. Now, the thing with the Orioles is they do strike out a lot against righties. So that's something that you can take a look at. Look at the Royals. They don't hit the ball very hard. They have a huge weighted on base. They have a huge weighted runs created. They don't strike out much, but they don't walk much. So that's why I don't take pitchers against the Royals, because there's no edge. Now, we start talking about going down to the Reds, and we can do an opposite sort, and now we see the bad teams. So pretty much what you can do is you can focus on, the 30 or so. Now, you do have some greens. It looks like you have some teams. Like, look, the Pittsburgh Pirates are a good right-handed hitting lineup. They're hitting the ball hard, but their metrics show that they strike out a ton. They're not producing runs, and they're not getting on base, and they're just not hitting. So from that perspective, the Pirates are definitely a team that you can pick on, but you have to be careful. Now, look at the worst team in the league at this point, the Brewers against left-handed pitching. Now, remember we had Clayton Kershaw the other night, and that's why I rode Kershaw, because every single metric shows that the Brewers are horrible against left-handed pitching. So this is a fun chart that you can play with. It only takes about 10 minutes to do. I love it. I'm in it every day. And then we'll talk about, as we move forward, some of the other statistics that I pull every day. I do about 30 minutes of data pulling every day, and I just color code, and then it kind of gives me an opportunity, whether it's on the pitching side or the hitting side. And that's a quick way where you can do daily fantasy research within you probably need about an hour a day. I think you need about 30 minutes in the morning. Maybe invest in some of our shows, DFS Minute, The Curve. and then you need about 30 minutes at night when lineups come out to put in all your contests and things like that. But you can be a winning daily fantasy baseball player in less than an hour a day if you have the right tools and you have the right information that we give you here at RotoCurve. All right, so hopefully that came through great. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Every time we do this kind of stuff, you guys seem to eat it up. So hopefully we hit on some stuff today. And we'll come back today at 12 noon with the Curve Show with Benny and Josh. As we always say here at RotoCurve, stay classy, DFS.